After I died, I knew that I was a supporting female character in a book. The leading actress was my elder sister, and I was just a tiny speck of dust beside her. The god said indifferently, "I can send you back into the book to take revenge on anyone." After thinking for a long time, I finally spoke in a low voice. I had no grudges to avenge. If possible, I hoped the god could help me and let me know what it felt like to be loved wholeheartedly. This might be my only highlight moment in the book, dying for the leading actress. I was a timid and cowardly person. I didn't even know I could have such great explosive power until I pushed my sister away. I pushed her to the roadside and watched Matthew hold her tightly. And I was hit and flung away by a car that couldn't brake in time. Scenes of my whole life probably flashed through my mind. Strangely enough, I could even recall the scene when I was still in my mother's womb. I quickly relived my childhood, adolescence, and youth again like watching a passing parade. It turned out that I had always been so inconspicuous. When I was young, my parents would say to me, "Aurora, your sister is not in good health. Be more accommodating to her. If you want anything, just tell us. Don't compete with your sister." I knew what my sister wanted, but I didn't know what I wanted. Maybe I wanted more the praise from my parents after I behaved obediently, like, "Aurora is so sensible." When my feelings began to sprout, Matthew said to me apologetically, "Aurora, you are very nice, but I'm sorry. The person I like has always been Ivy." Everyone said I was nice, but everyone would choose my sister. I had guessed this result even before I confessed my feelings. My life ended at the age of 22, when I was stepping out of the university campus. I seemed to have detached from my body and become extremely light. I saw that my sister didn't dare to look at my body. She was clutching her chest tightly in Matthew's arms, and big tears were falling down. My parents seemed to still be in a daze. They didn't even notice that the luggage in their hands had fallen to the ground. After a long while, a shrill sound finally cut through the sweltering air, "Aurora." They couldn't see me, and I couldn't control myself either. I was floating around, not knowing where to float to, and then I entered an endless white space. The handsome god looked down at me and said, "Aurora, the supporting female character in A White Birch, died to save the leading actress. Normal, meeting the conditions. I can fulfill one of your wishes." The god said that I was a supporting female character, and my lifelong task was to stand beside the leading actress to make her shine brightly. When I was no longer useful, I could exit the stage. I murmured the title of this book, White Birch. My sister's name was Ivy. Father hoped that she would be as tough as a white birch tree. So this was a book with my sister as the leading character. No wonder, no wonder. Then I couldn't help but feel a little happy. The god asked me what I was smiling about. I opened my mouth with a smile, but my throat seemed to be choked. I know the reason why they all like my sister. It's not because I'm not good enough. I could feel that everyone loved me, but for them, this love was easily forgotten and ignored. If I wasn't careful, I couldn't find it anymore. I know you have grievances in your heart. I can send you back into the book to take revenge on anyone, eliminate your obsessions, and let you enter the cycle of reincarnation again. After thinking for a long time, I shook my head. Everyone has been nice to me. I have no grudges to avenge. I looked at the god. If possible, please help me and let me know what it feels like to be loved wholeheartedly. The god sighed and sent me away. His voice came from afar, "Once the obsession is eliminated, you will enter the cycle of reincarnation. My name is Aurora." The reason father gave me this name was that he hoped I would be a beautiful little girl, and my sister's name is Ivy. Because she was born with a heart disease, father hoped that she would be as strong as a birch tree, and my sister and I had never been separated. We were born together and grew up together. For 6 years in primary school, we were in the same school and the same class. At father's special request, the teacher would arrange us to be desk mates so that I could take care of her. Some boys gave my sister and me nicknames. My sister was Little Miss, and I was a little follower. Every time we heard such words, my sister would scold them back. Of course, her voice was very soft because her body didn't allow her to have big emotional fluctuations. My sister was very strong. Even when she was in great pain, sweating all over, she wouldn't cry. Unfortunately, I didn't live up to the blessings of my name. I was just average looking, while my sister was very beautiful. She had expressive eyes and fair skin, like a delicate doll. Sometimes I would wonder whether my parents, teachers, and others paid more attention to my sister because of her illness or because she was good looking. But I wouldn't ask. I had seen my sister when she had an attack, and I knew that she actually didn't like everyone crowding around her, nor did she like others to mention her illness. Since I was very young, so young that I couldn't even remember, I had always heard my parents say to me, although you are the younger sister, you should give in to your sister. Don't make her angry. I had always been very obedient. When my parents mentioned me to others, they could summarize me with the 4 words, obedient and sensible. But when it came to my sister, they seemed to have endless things to say about her. Although my sister was physically weak, she had big ambitions. She would do many things that I had never even thought of. Once, she climbed onto the rooftop and beckoned to me. My legs went weak with fear. I choked back my tears and said, "Sister, come down. It's so high." She laughed heartily. "Don't be afraid. It's so cool to sit here and enjoy the breeze." When I couldn't find my sister, I called my father. He rushed back home, found the rooftop, watched my sister climb down slowly, and then ran over quickly to protect her. He didn't even dare to breathe heavily. He carried my sister downstairs. When he passed by me, he didn't even give me a glance. My eyes were full of tears, and I couldn't see the road clearly. I was tripped by the messy ropes on the rooftop. It hurt a lot. But my father didn't even turn around to wait for me. When we got back home, Mother was already waiting at home. They sent my sister into her room. Probably after coaxing her to sleep, they came out and closed the door gently. My arm was scraped, and the blood on the wound had already clotted. But when my parents looked over, it felt even more painful. I thought Mother would hold me in her arms and ask me if it hurt, and Father would go and get the first aid kit for me. But neither of those things happened. Father slapped me directly, which made me fall to the side. My arm didn't hurt as much as my face. My face was burning with pain, and there was a buzzing sound in my ears. When I was no longer dizzy, I heard Mother crying and saying, "I just went out for a while. I asked you to take care of your sister. Can't you do such a small thing for your parents? What would I do if something happened to your sister?" I had never been beaten before. Father had always been very gentle. This abnormal scene made me dare not cry out loud, but I couldn't control my tears. I was shaking all over. Mother later held me in her arms and apologized to me, saying that Father didn't mean to hit me. They were just too worried about my sister. At that time, I should have been 6 years old. I hadn't started primary school yet. I couldn't remember the exact age clearly. I only remembered that I cried secretly under the quilt for several days. After that, I knew that I had to take care of my sister. It wasn't something I could do casually, but something I must do and had to do well. When I was in junior high school, a family moved in opposite us. They had 2 brothers. The eldest brother, Matthew, was 2 years older than us. He was a man of few words but very meticulous. The younger brother, Ryan, was just a few days older than us. He was very sunny, and his smile was very nice. After they moved in, Father didn't send my sister and me to school anymore. My sister wanted to go to school by herself. Coincidentally, there were 2 boys. With them around, Father was a bit more relieved. But I knew that he had secretly followed us for half a month behind our backs. Matthew would deliberately slow down his pace to wait for my sister to catch up, while Ryan would walk with headphones on. When I looked at him a few more times, he noticed that I was looking at him. He bent his eyes, took off one side of the headphones, and said, "Did you call me?" I quickly lowered my head and shook it. Then I felt an itch in my ear. He stuffed an earphone into my ear. "We're in the same grade. Let's listen together." The recording of the English textbook came from the earphone. I was stunned for a moment. My eyebrows and eyes unconsciously drooped down. I didn't like English. Why would anyone listen to the recording on the way to school? It was painful enough to listen to it all the way. Unexpectedly, every day after that, Ryan would hand me the headphones. When I said I had to watch over my sister, he said, "My brother can take care of her. Don't worry about it. Not to take care of my sister was the most secret and selfish thought I had ever had. I had never said it out loud, nor had I ever done it. But I had thought about it. Ryan's lighthearted words seemed to instantly grab my heartstrings. I stretched out my fingertips and took the headphones. But guilt was surging in my heart, pressing me so that I could hardly breathe. English needs to be listened to more to practice the sense of language. You can't always copy the textbook blindly. Ryan said in my ear. He was in his voice-changing period, and his voice wasn't very nice. So every time he spoke, he would deliberately slow down his tone and control his voice. Like a neighborhood committee secretary holding a meeting. I couldn't help laughing. He immediately shut his mouth, pursed his lips, and his face turned red. That day, he came to my class to look for me and handed me an exercise book, but he didn't say a word to me. On the exercise book were the key points he had excerpted and the learning methods he had summarized. I remembered that when Ryan took the entrance examination, he was the first in English in the grade, but his Chinese was not good, and his total score was dragged down to the 10th place. When I was walking out of school in the evening, I walked up to him and whispered thank you to him. He looked at me, and his eyes were very strange. He just grunted in response to AT this time. I hadn't realized what the problem was. In the following days, Ryan was always silently handing me the headphones. When I realized that Ryan wasn't talking to me anymore, I was very anxious. Why wasn't he talking to me anymore? Did he dislike me? Had I done something to make him angry? He had been very nice to me. I didn't want him to dislike me. But I was timid. I didn't dare to take the initiative to find him. To thank Matthew and Ryan for taking care of my sister and me going to and from school, my parents invited their family to dinner. At the dinner table, I was sitting face to face with Ryan, but he didn't say a word and didn't even look at me. Father was talking to Uncle Shang, and Mother was talking while picking food for my sister so that she didn't have to get up. I was pushing the rice in my bowl around, and it tasted like chewing wax. Aurora, what would you like to eat? The voice was familiar after a long absence, with an awkward tone during the voice-changing period. I looked at Ryan. His ears were red. You can't reach this side. Is there anything you want to eat? My parents would also ask me what I wanted, but to avoid causing them more worry, I usually shook my head. But this time, looking from his face to the plate of shrimps in front of him, I wanted to talk to him. I said, I want to eat shrimps. Mother didn't want to trouble others. She looked at me and said, she can reach it. She just needs to stand up. I then lowered my head and nodded, wanting to say that I could do it myself. Ryan directly stood up, bent over, picked up the celery in front of me, and put down the plate of shrimps. The porcelain plate collided with the glass, making a crisp sound. I felt myself tremble. There was a moment of numbness. Aunt Johnson was blaming him for being impolite, but I couldn't hear her, only that crisp sound was ringing in my ears, deafeningly loud. I couldn't remember the last time someone had placed a full plate of my favorite food in front of me and my sister, and I had the same taste. The foods we liked were almost the same. I just didn't like coriander, but I could tolerate it. And my sister liked coriander very much, so in those foods I liked, there was always that hint of a taste I didn't like. But this plate of shrimps didn't have it. The color of the shrimps was rich and bright, and they smelled delicious. It was what I liked. My eyes suddenly became hot. I lowered my head even more. My bangs covered my eyes. No one could see my expression until we finished eating and were waiting for the car outside. I slowly made my way to Ryan's side and said thank you to him. He looked quite surprised, raised his eyebrows, cleared his throat, and said, it's nothing. My mom makes even better shrimp. Next time you come to my place, I'll ask her to make it for you. I nodded and agreed. After a while, he suddenly lowered his eyes and said to me, why do you hide yourself? I was stunned as I met his clear gaze. He gestured randomly to me. When we were just having dinner, I felt like you were almost going to hide under the table. His gestures were really funny. I refuted him in a low voice, but without much confidence. I didn't. I did have a lot of things on my mind. Those thoughts would show in my eyes, so I'd lower my head to hide them, not wanting to be discovered, but at this moment, he was looking at me intently, and I couldn't lower my head. I could only shift my gaze slightly. Fine if you didn't, Ryan shrugged. If there's anything you need my help with, just let me know. I clenched my hands. His words gave me a subtle sense of courage. I stared at him and said, then can you always talk to me? Ryan opened his eyes slightly, touched his neck uncomfortably, and there was a faint blush on his face. He mumbled a response. Yeah, I got it. I liked being with Ryan. When I was with him, it was relaxing even without talking. Although we weren't in the same class and usually only met in the corridor on the way to and from school, he would always come to my side, hand me the earphones, and patiently tell me, you must dare to speak up. My sister heard this and said, Aurora has started to speak. The English teacher said she has made great progress and her pronunciation is very standard. My face flushed. I tugged at the corner of my sister's clothes. My sister looked at me and teased, are you shy? Ryan was also looking at me and smiling. Matthew was standing in the front, looking back at the three of us. Such attention made me a bit at a loss. I wasn't used to speaking in front of people. I was worried that my voice would be drowned out in the air with no response, leaving me nervous to the point of holding my breath in an unnoticed corner. When I first started learning English, I didn't dare to speak up. From being unremarkable to becoming almost invisible, my English naturally wasn't good. It continued like this until junior high school, and English was my weakest subject. But today, the English teacher came to me and asked if I'd like to participate in the school's English speech competition. She would give me special training after school. She gave me time to think about it. Before Ryan entered the room, I grabbed his school bag and said to him, the teacher asked me to participate in the speech competition. He turned around, opened his mouth with an, and soon smiled. Then we'll be rivals. I won't go easy on you. His smile was so infectious that it made those who saw it feel lighter too. My bit of timidity was also dispelled by him. I suppressed the little joy in my heart and told my parents about this at the dinner table. I saw their instant happiness, and then subconsciously looked at my sister. After feeling relieved, they praised me. They said, Aurora is so amazing. I had always been ordinary. There was nothing about me that could make them proudly tell others about their little daughter Aurora. Maybe now there was a little something that could make them mention me when they talked. I told them that the teacher would train me after school. My mom immediately asked me, then you can't go home with your sister? My breath hitched, as if pricked by a tiny pine needle. It was bearable, but it hurt. If I confirm the registration, I will get home late. I grasped the chopsticks tightly and looked at them. Should I participate? My parents looked at each other and didn't answer me immediately. The originally happy expressions on their faces gradually disappeared like the ebbing tide, leaving only the wrinkles of a faint smile. My sister's face darkened. She looked at my parents and gently said to me, go. Why not? My sister is so great and should show it to let others know. She said to my parents, Aurora needs to be trained. Isn't there still Matthew, Ryan, and me to go home together? If something really happens to me, she's just a little girl. Mom interrupted her, what are you talking about? What could happen to you? Sister also interrupted Mom, right, nothing will happen to me. She patted my shoulder. Tell the teacher tomorrow that you want to participate. There was a soft light in my sister's eyes. Dad put down the chopsticks in his hand and had a smile on his face again. Participate. Why not? At worst, I'll go pick up Ivy from school again. Aurora goes to the competition. Compared to Mom, Dad showed more concern for me. However, I was a bit afraid of him. When he was nice to me, the scattered fears in my heart lingered. At night, my sister wanted to sleep in the same bed with me. The two of us lay side by side, neither of us asleep. Suddenly, my sister sighed, I'm so envious that you can have physical education classes and go to competitions. I'm like a useless person. I'm not allowed to do anything. I turned to look at my sister but didn't say it out loud. I was also envious of my sister. I envied the attention and care she received. But I couldn't say such things. My sister was sick. If I still clung to the love she received, wouldn't that be too unreasonable? But sister is really amazing. I wish my studies were half as good as yours. Yeah, I'm amazing. She turned over and stared at me in the darkness. So, Aurora, if there's anything you want to do, just do it. I won't be a burden to you. It felt like my heart was hit, aching and swelling. I immediately refuted, you're not a burden. My sister was excellent, always at the top of her class, patiently teaching me to do exercises. She was definitely not a burden. I groped for her hand under the quilt. I like sister the best. Mom and Dad paid more attention to my sister, but my sister always remembered to include me. Originally, it should have been me taking care of her. But when I was called a little follower by the boys in primary school, it was she who stood in front of me, not giving an inch. I held her hand and said to her, don't be angry. Let's just ignore them. My sister threw the book beside her at them. She's my sister, not a little follower. If you give her any more nicknames, I'll tell the teacher that you want me to get sick. My elder sister has also been protecting me all the time. The English teacher started to train me. The first thing she did, however, had nothing to do with English. Instead, she made me stand against the wall and pushed aside my bangs. When giving a speech, you have to pay attention to your posture. Don't be so timid. Walk with your head held high from now on. You know, I was holding the materials given by the teacher. When I came out of the office, I saw a person standing by the wall that he had been staring at the playground originally. When he withdrew his gaze, his eyes met mine. Ryan stood up straight and walked towards me. I'm on duty this week. Let's go home together. I followed him, staring at his heels, my mind working slowly. Didn't the teacher tell you not to lower your head? He turned his head back at some point. Suddenly, he stopped and stood in front of me, which gave me a fright. I looked at him and couldn't help but want to lower my head again. Ryan suddenly raised his hand and knocked on my head. Why are you so much like a little snail? You shrink into your shell whenever you encounter something. I replied to him, a snail carries its home on its back. It's so nice to be able to go home anytime. He put his hands behind his head, turned around, and walked forward. I won't say whether a snail is good or not, but if you lower your head again, you'll surely lose the competition to me. I stood there for a while and then chased after him. I hadn't considered winning or losing, it's just that I had hidden myself for so long. Suddenly being found out by others, they had expectations of me, and I didn't want to let them down. Ryan looked at me a few more times. Why do I feel that you're suddenly happy? I didn't tell him that their existence made me feel warm. During the 2 weeks of training, all my free time was filled with English, but I didn't dislike English anymore. 2 days before the competition, the teacher asked me to trim my bangs so that my hair wouldn't block my eyes. I was at home, facing the mirror, holding a pair of scissors and cutting my hair bit by bit. The broken hairs were falling down. I combed my bangs again. Now my eyes could no longer be hidden. There would be no obstruction when I lowered my head. My heart was beating a bit fast. I wasn't quite used to the bright and wide view in front of me. I walked out of the room and into the kitchen to find my mom. I asked her if there was anything I could help with. She was cooking with her back to me. Go and do your homework. Go and practice. You don't need to help. I touched my bangs. Then I heard the sound of the door opening. Dad came back from work and said that he had bought fresh river shrimps from the market. I trotted over to take the river shrimps. Dad rubbed my hair. Xian, suddenly, there was a clattering sound coming from the room. I was stunned for a moment. Dad didn't even have time to change his shoes properly before he rushed into my elder sister's room. My elder sister was covering her chest, sitting on a chair, her face as white as a sheet, breathing rapidly. The sound of the ambulance alerted the people in this building. Mom and Dad anxiously sent my elder sister into the ambulance. I wanted to follow them, but I was too small. I couldn't keep up with their speed and was also submerged by the crowd. When I went downstairs, the ambulance had already left. Matthew grabbed my arm and asked me, your elder sister had an attack. How could she suddenly have an attack? Ryan pushed him away. Why are you being so fierce? How could she know? I shook my head, tightly pursing my lips, unable to wipe away my tears. Matthew softened his tone and apologized to me. I still shook my head and ran back home, staying beside my mobile phone. I didn't have time to close the door. Ryan came in and stood beside me. Ivy won't be in trouble. Don't worry too much. She still said she wanted to watch your competition, didn't she? Tears were continuously falling onto the screen of my mobile phone. The black screen reflected my face. It was impossible not to worry. I had been worried all the time. I was afraid that one day I would no longer have my elder sister. The light in the living room was on all night. Ryan also sat beside me all night. I was dizzy. At the moment when the phone rang, I answered it nervously. How is my elder sister? Dad's voice was very tired. It's okay. Your elder sister is okay. Your mom and I can't go back. Can you eat and go to school by yourself? I quickly nodded. Only later did I realize and verbally agreed. I hung up the phone. In an instant, I was exhausted. It felt like a huge mountain was pressing down on me. I leaned against the sofa. The already dried eyes were blinked out. A few more tears by me. Ryan said, why don't you ask for leave today too? No need. As soon as the words came out, my voice was dry and unpleasant. I went to pack my school bag. As soon as I walked out of the room, Ryan pulled me to their house. Aunt Johnson also prepared a breakfast for me. I was absent-minded all day. After school, I didn't go home. Matthew, Ryan and I went to the hospital together. My elder sister was lying on the hospital bed, wearing a ventilator. She had already woken up. She saw me immediately and waved to me. I walked to her side and called her, Sister, are you still in pain? Her eyes curved. She opened her mouth and the mist floated on the ventilator. Suddenly she raised her hand, touched my bangs, and touched my exposed eyebrows. It was like a dam had burst in an instant. I cried again. Clearly, it was my elder sister who was sick, but I always cried more than she did. Mom and Dad asked Matthew to take care of me. He said that he already regarded me as his sister and would surely take good care of me. I followed them home. All the way I was in a daze. Matthew touched my forehead. Do you have a fever? There are medicines at home. There were always various medicines at home. I had dinner at Ryan's house and then went back home. Ryan came over with my school bag. We finished our homework together. He urged me to take the medicine and go to sleep. After taking the medicine, I soon felt sleepy. I slept very soundly that night. The dreams were changing frequently. There were my elder sister, my parents, and also tomorrow's competition. I woke up before the alarm clock rang the next day. I put on the competition clothes that Mom had specially prepared for me before. The teacher said that the whole competition would be videotaped and could be shown to Mom and Dad later. Now they probably don't have the mind to watch my competition. Ryan was waiting at my doorstep, reminding me to take my medicine and bring an umbrella. He was a bit nagging. I laughed at him and said, you pay more attention than my mom. His face turned red and his voice softened as he said, didn't you ask me to keep talking to you? I nodded and said, yeah, I like listening to you talk to me. I thanked him, and the red on his face spread to his neck. Even his fingers were red. It was raining outside and the weather was getting colder. I felt that I was wearing too little. The wind was blowing into my clothes and my throat was itchy. Fortunately, the competition was in the morning, so I could still hold back the slight cough. I recited the speech that I had practiced countless times in front of my teachers and classmates. At the moment of bowing, I felt a sense of relief all over my body, but my head was heavy, so heavy that I almost fell down. I didn't wait for the results to be announced and didn't get to see Ryan's speech either. I was sent to the infirmary by the teacher. The teacher in the infirmary took my temperature and said to me, I'll give you a sick note. Call your parents to pick you up and take you to the hospital. He had already handed me the phone. I raised my hand but hesitated a little and then the phone was taken by another person. Matthew lowered his head and dialed quickly on his phone, I'll ask my mom to come. My heart tightened and I said, don't bother Auntie. I can go to the hospital by myself. He raised the hand holding the phone and gave me a look, you need someone to take care of you now. Don't be brave. I took him to my classroom. He waited outside while I went in to pack my things. When I came out, he took my school bag casually. We walked silently to the school gate. Suddenly, he said, if you call your uncle and aunt, they will surely come. You're still young. You don't need to be so mature. There was a gentle pat on my head. Matthew stroked my head and said, don't think too much. For a moment, I couldn't speak and didn't know what to say. Aunt Johnson took me to the hospital near the school. She was busy getting the 4 for me, pouring water for me, and even brought a blanket to cover me. I thanked Aunt Johnson and then leaned back on the chair to sleep. Damn, my head was dizzy and I was very tired and wanted to sleep, but the feeling of exhaustion was so strong that I couldn't fall asleep. Instead, I just felt uncomfortable all over. In days, I seemed to hear my mom's voice. She was talking to Aunt Johnson. After a while, Aunt Johnson left and she sat on the chair beside me. I opened my eyes to confirm that she was really there. Mom? Mom nodded. Her clothes were half wet. She asked me if I was thirsty. I shook my head and she sighed. You're really not letting people worry less. You two sisters are more troublesome than each other. The words, "I'm sorry," were on the tip of my tongue, but then Mom said, "You should learn to take care of yourself. Mom can't always watch over you. You've always been good." Try to make me worry less, I said in a low voice. I know. After the 4 was done, Mom took me home. She made me lie down on the bed and tucked me in. You sleep for a while. I'll call you up later to eat and take medicine. After the 4 drip, I was much more awake. Now that I couldn't sleep, I just stared at the ceiling in a daze, with my mind blank and not thinking about anything. It wasn't until Mom pushed the door open, turned on the light, and called me to eat that I realized a long time had passed. It was just Mom and me at the dining table. I was halfway through eating when Mom stood up hurriedly to pack the food. I'll go and take food to your dad and sister. Dad will be home tomorrow. Don't be afraid if you're alone. Mom left and I didn't finish eating either. I put the remaining food in the fridge, turned off the light, and lay back on the bed, talking to myself. I'd better not get sick again in the future. It's such a hassle. Ryan brought back the certificate of excellence for me. He said that the judge's comments on me were really good. They said a lot. He asked me how I was feeling and said that he had wanted to send me to the infirmary at that time but was stopped by the teacher. I asked him, "Do you play basketball?" He was stunned for a moment and nodded without knowing why. I earnestly requested him, "Ryan, could you teach me to play basketball? If I exercise and keep fit, I won't get sick so easily. Being sick is really tough. My sister has been sick for so many years. She must be extremely tired." He didn't hesitate and agreed directly. I looked at him until his ears turned red secretly. It seemed that he had never refused any of my requests and had never missed any of my words. "Ryan, thank you." And the words I said to him the most should be, "Thank you." After my sister was discharged from the hospital, her physical condition was much worse. Dad didn't dare to let her go to and from school with us anymore and wanted to pick us up and drop us off every day. I butted in and said, "I want to play basketball with Ryan for a while after school." Mom and Dad immediately looked at my sister with concern. My sister's face was still very pale. She didn't look at Mom and Dad but said to me, "That's great. Playing basketball can make you taller." Although Mom and Dad agreed, I saw the faint reproach in their eyes. Mom took me to the kitchen secretly. "Your sister has just been discharged from the hospital. She can't run or jump. Why did you mention basketball in front of her? What if she gets sad again?" I looked at Mom and felt that I was empty all over. I nodded numbly. "I won't say it again next time. Mom always thinks more thoroughly than I do." Somehow I said to Mom again, "Mom, I want to play basketball." Mom stroked my head and said, Sure. Just be a bit more careful in front of your sister." Her hand touched my bangs. I asked her, "Mom, did you notice that I cut my bangs?" Mom was stunned for a moment. Her gaze fell on my forehead and she said hesitantly, "Yes." "Did you cut them yourself? They look nice." Our eyes met and I was the first to look away. I looked at the ground and murmured, "Yes, I cut them myself." The kitchen was too small and it seemed that the air was thin as well. I walked around my mother and out of the kitchen. When I reached the door, I couldn't hold back and said to my mother, "Sister won't mind." Sister especially hoped that I could do what I wanted to do. She really hoped that everyone around her could do what they wanted to do. After entering high school, Sister often asked for leave. I studied even harder so that I could go to the hospital to teach Sister after I had learned something. Sister was really much smarter than me. Many theorems that I explained in a mess could be easily understood by her with just a few words. I had a hard time studying. Fortunately, Ryan helped me. No matter what he was doing, whenever I went to him, he would always ask me first what I needed. He was very kind to me, but slowly I began to feel a bit panicked. I couldn't help thinking that after graduation, we might not be in the same university. He might not be by my side anymore, and I couldn't get used to the days without him. Such thoughts made me have the idea of taking precautions in advance. Starting from now, I would reduce my dependence on him so that it wouldn't be so hard when we separated later. I began to reduce the frequency of going to him. It changed from twice a day to once a day and then to once every 2 days. Then he came to me. He came to my class to look for me and naturally pulled out the chair of my desk mate. Since sister wasn't there, the seat beside had been empty all the time. Aurora, haven't you had any questions you couldn't solve recently? I was originally reciting words and his arrival disrupted my thoughts. I subconsciously replied, I asked the monitor. The monitor was sitting at the table behind me. When he heard me mention his name, he responded and looked up and then saw Ryan. They knew each other and often played basketball together. Ryan said, his grades aren't as good as mine, and he doesn't explain as clearly as I do. The monitor rolled his eyes at him and then lowered his head again. Look at him not studying hard and secretly playing with his mobile phone. Ryan picked up the exercise book on my desk, opened it, and said, I know your weak points better than he does. You'll get twice the result with half the effort if you ask me. Are you going to keep putting him down like this? The monitor kicked the chair Ryan was sitting on. Ryan's body shook a bit and the two of them began to bicker. I was trying to stay away from Ryan, but Ryan came to me on his own. He didn't even ask me the reason for staying away. He silently brought our relationship back to what it was before. I just couldn't bear to push him away. How could I bear to push away someone who was being so nice to me? Matthew was admitted to a top medical university. He called our parents and said that he had met a professor who could treat sister's illness. Father then arranged for sister's suspension of schooling. Not long after that, sister was transferred to another hospital. The day sister went there was a weekend and I went with her. I said to sister, you will definitely get better. Mother went to that city to take care of sister while father and I stayed at home. But I didn't have much to say to father and it seemed that father didn't either. The only daily interactions were him calling me to eat or asking me how my studies were recently. Later, to treat sister's illness, more and more money was needed and I hardly saw father at home anymore. In this family of 4, it seemed that I was the only one left. Before I knew it, my parents entrusted me to Aunt Johnson. I saw Aunt Johnson more times than I saw them. I spent more time in Ryan's room than I did at my own home. I didn't like staying alone in an empty and dark room. That feeling was like I was isolated from the world. I really felt like I had disappeared, swallowed up by the darkness. I often felt that I had fallen into a space with no light, no warmth, only the deathly silence and the ubiquitous despair. Every time I woke up from a nightmare, I didn't dare to go back to sleep. I was so afraid of falling back into it. I wanted to get out. I wanted to hear sounds and see light. I became more and more greedy for the time spent with Ryan and the time when there was sunlight during the day. At the Senior 3 oath-taking ceremony, the school also organized an 18th birthday celebration for us and let us go out to climb mountains and reach the summit. The sun was especially bright that day. It shone on me so brightly that I could hardly open my eyes, but it was very warm. I stood in the pavilion on the top of the mountain, looking down the mountain. In a trance, I actually had a feeling of being suspended in the air. Ryan walked up to me and, like magic, there was a sunflower in his hand. Happy 18th birthday. I took the flower, feeling dazed and somehow blurted out, Ryan, will you always be by my side? There were classmates around and they were very sensitive to such words. Immediately, they excitedly looked at me and Ryan. I came to my senses belatedly and wanted to find something to say to smooth things over. But Ryan's voice had already been carried to my ears by the wind, sure. The classmates were jeering, and I felt a bit of warmth in my heart. Ryan would never refuse me. In a few more days, it would be the birthday of sister and me. Unfortunately, it wasn't a weekend, so I couldn't go to spend it with her. Father couldn't come back that day either, and there was no one next door. I just waited in the living room, not really thinking that I could wait for anything. There are priorities in life. For our current family, a birthday didn't matter much. Then I received a video call from sister. In the video, she was wearing a hospital gown and a birthday hat, and the ward was decorated very cozily. There came a chorus of voices from the other side, "Happy 18th birthday." Sister, mother, Matthew, and some people I didn't know. It was so lively over there, while it was so desolate on my side, like an abyss. After I finished talking to them, suddenly I felt really stuffy staying alone at home, so I climbed up to the top floor step by step. Standing on the high place, blowing the night wind, I could see very far from here. No wonder sister liked to climb up here when she was little. I walked around the messy things, sat on the high platform, faced the wind, and spread out my 5 fingers, then my hand was gently held. The wind seemed to be able to lift people up. My mobile phone rang in my pocket. I pressed the answer button and heard Ryan's voice, "You're not at home? Where are you?" Ryan had already passed the voice-changing period, and his current voice was really nice. I said, "Your voice is really nice." He paused for a moment and then said, "Where are you? I'll come to celebrate your birthday with you." I told him that I was on the rooftop. Not long after that, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Ryan was out of breath, carrying a cake box in his hand. "What are you doing here at night? Sister likes to enjoy the breeze here, and I want to try it too." He put the box on the ground and reached out his hand to me. "Come down. It's dangerous up there." I obeyed him and jumped down from the high platform, throwing myself at him and making him stagger back a few steps till he was much taller than me and could completely envelop me in his arms. I buried my face in front of his body, and suddenly, tears streamed out continuously, as if a valve had been opened and I couldn't restrain them at once. I asked him, if I had been the one who got sick from the beginning, would they have taken care of me like that too? I don't blame my sister, nor do I blame them. My sister was in great pain, and they also had their difficulties. I just can't figure out one thing. I just want to know what I should do to make them notice me more. Will I be loved by them like that? Why do they always forget about me? Am I not their daughter? Or is it because I'm not good enough that they don't like me that much? It seemed that the long-suppressed grievances suddenly found an outlet and instantly overwhelmed me. Ryan held me tightly and kept saying to me, "You are wonderful." I kept denying myself, as if possessed, because I couldn't find the reason why my parents always forgot about me. Finally, I broke down. I don't know how long it had been. I felt that Ryan's arms holding me were trembling. He was repeating, "I will be with you. I will only choose you." His head rested on my shoulder as he said softly, "Aurora, I was born for you." Born for me? I realized that it wasn't he who was trembling, but I was trembling all over. Yes, I will only choose you. I had never heard such words before. I was used to being left out, used to hearing, "Be obedient, sensible, and don't cause trouble." Born for me. Won't you be tired? You're just a little girl. You can be willful. Thank you. I said thank you to Ryan again. But I feel so bad, Ryan. I can't be happy anymore. Ryan said I was sick. I said that I had been exercising all the time to avoid getting sick. I was in good health. I didn't like being sick either. Being sick only brought pain to the people around me. I still went to school, did exercises, and took the college entrance examination. I was no different from before, but I felt so tired that I didn't want to deal with anyone. Ryan followed me closely. He even took me to the hospital for examinations, got the diagnosis report, and then went to buy medicine for me and watch me take the medicine. He was also so tired because of me. I advised him, "You'd better choose someone else. I'm such a troublesome person. I now have a kind of frankness that I don't care about anything, or a bit of giving up on myself." His eyes were so red as he said to me, "Don't say such things, okay?" Why was he even sadder than me? Seeing him sad made me sad too, and my tears were always out of control. Ryan pulled me and went straight to my father's company. He handed the diagnosis report to him. "Uncle, do you really hope that Aurora will be so sensible? Are you satisfied now that she is this sensible?" Instead, he shed tears, which he quickly wiped away, leaving only his red eyes glaring at my father fiercely. My father looked at the diagnosis report as if he couldn't read the words, nor did he seem to recognize me. After reading the diagnosis report, he looked at me again and muttered to himself, "Aurora." I forced a smile at him and said softly, "It's okay. The doctor said I can get better by taking medicine." My father's lips were trembling. Suddenly, he raised his palm and slapped himself hard. The sound was loud. I was stunned and didn't have time to stop him. My father raised his hand again. I quickly hugged his hand and my father opened his mouth wide but didn't make a single sound. His side face was red, and there were tears pooling in his eyes. His other hand kept patting the table beside him. It took a long time before a sob came out of his throat. But I seemed to be detached from the feeling of caring for him and just watched my father cry numbly. At this moment, I suddenly had a real feeling. Looking at Ryan, I realized that Ryan was right. I was really sick. Otherwise, how could I not feel sorry for my father? My father held my hand, trying to calm down but finding it hard to do so at once. "I'm sorry, daughter. I'm sorry for hitting you. It made you afraid of me, and I don't even know how to talk to you." My head buzzed. It turned out that I wasn't the only one who remembered that slap. According to my nature, I should have said to my father at this moment, "Dad, I've forgotten it." I used the words, "I don't remember," to cover up many things, and I could have done the same this time. These words were circling in my head, but I just couldn't open my mouth. That slap had been my nightmare for many years. On the mornings after having that nightmare, I was always afraid to see my father. My father was still apologizing to me. I just listened in silence. When he calmed down a bit, I said, "I haven't told Mom yet." My father was stunned for a moment. I said, "Don't tell them for now. Sister is at a crucial stage. Later, you can ask for leave, and we'll go to see Sister." I hadn't seen my sister for a long time. I missed her so much. I looked back at Ryan. "Will you come with us, okay?" Ryan would never refuse me. We went to see my sister. My sister was in good condition. She would be able to leave the hospital after one more operation. When she saw me, she pinched my face. "Why have you lost so much weight? Is studying tiring?" I shook my head with a smile. "No, Ryan has been tutoring me all the time. I think I did well in the exam." Mom said to my sister, "You're almost there. You'll soon be able to go back to school." My sister smiled. Mom pulled me back a little and whispered to me, "Your sister is at a very crucial stage recently. Watch your words and make your sister happy." I looked at Mom and said, "Oh." Mom gave me a look. That look was really strange and a bit unfamiliar. I wanted to go back, but suddenly Mom grabbed me again and asked me hesitantly, "Aurora, is there anything wrong with you lately? Does Mom think there's something wrong with me?" She covered her heart, frowned, and shook her head. "I just have this strange feeling in my heart. Maybe I'm just too tired from taking care of my sister without getting enough rest." I withdrew my hand. "Why don't you go and take a rest? I'll help out here," she nodded. I sat on the head of my sister's bed, peeling an apple for her and chatting with her about school, telling her where the school was being renovated and that she could see it when she went back. She was still reading books when she was in the hospital ward, and she would surely still be at the top of her class. Suddenly, she said, "Aurora, why aren't you happy?" The hand holding the knife paused, and the apple peel broke. I looked at her with a smile. "I'll be happy when my sister gets better." I hoped more than anyone else that my sister could be healthy, and my sister looked at me with gentle eyes, and there was also a tinge of pity in them. I avoided her gaze and continued to peel the apple with my head down. Originally, I hoped that my sister would be healthy so that with two equally healthy daughters, Mom and Dad would treat us equally. But now that longing for love in my heart seemed to have calmed down. Hoping my sister would be healthy now simply meant hoping that she would be okay. After my sister had her last surgery and hadn't woken up yet when she came out of the operating room, Ryan and I crossed the road to buy flowers from the florist across the street. My sister liked lilies. I was waiting for the shopkeeper to wrap the flowers when I turned my head and saw a sunflower right in front of me. My face almost buried into the flowers. Ryan put the flower into my hand. I pursed my lips and smiled at him, thinking of his words, "born for me." I said softly to him, Ryan, thank you. He said, I'm glad to. If he hadn't been in my life, I would have always huddled in a corner, hiding myself away, with no one caring about me. My vision flickered, and Ryan's outline became blurry. I blinked my eyes and realized that the blurriness must have been an illusion because the sunlight behind him was too dazzling. When Ryan and I returned to the hospital, both Mom and Dad were standing in the corridor, looking at me simultaneously. I stopped in my tracks. Dad averted his gaze and lowered his head. Mom walked over, held the hand with which I was holding the flowers, blinked her eyes, and looked at me helplessly. Why didn't you tell Mom? Why didn't you tell Mom? Mom didn't know. Mom was crying in front of me, but my heart didn't stir at all. I was afraid of causing you trouble. Don't you like me when I'm sensible? Actually, there were better ways to comfort me. For example, it's not serious. I'll get better soon. Or, it's not your fault. I've been under too much pressure from schoolwork. But I chose the way that would make them feel guilty. Did I want to make them wake up and be nice to me through their guilt? It didn't seem like that was the purpose. I just simply wanted to make them feel guilty. I suddenly realized that what I actually wanted was for them to regret leaving me alone in the past days and nights, leaving me in some inconspicuous corner, forgetting me in their words and hearts. Mom bent down, rested her forehead on my shoulder, and sobbed. I'm sorry, Aurora. Mom will definitely cure you. I asked her, Mom, did you only realize that you love me deeply because I'm sick? Mom couldn't say a word and just shook her head blindly. Will you and Dad regret it? Regret always ignoring me? I'm such an obvious person. Why could you always overlook me? Or is my existence just a trouble for you? She said, Aurora, I'm sorry. My heart felt lighter, and I slowly let out a breath. I feel that I don't want to forgive you for the time being. Now was the time when I was being the most willful, not understanding my parents, not thinking for them, and only wanting to express my own emotions. My heart felt lighter, and I slowly let out a breath. I feel that I don't want to forgive you for the time being. The surrounding scene was like a mirror being broken. The hospital was collapsing, the world was being disintegrated, and the sky became a white hole. But Dad was still looking at me guiltily, and Mom was still crying on my shoulder. I watched them slowly turn into pieces and finally disappear. Everything became white, only the sunflower in my hand still had bright colors. That was my obsession. I woke up as if from a dream. My obsession was to have wholehearted love and to hear apologies from Mom and Dad. I turned around. Ryan, who was standing behind me, was gradually blurred by the light. He tilted his head and smiled at me, mouthing the words, "Goodbye," to me. He disappeared into specks of light, and finally, the God I first met was standing there. I remembered everything and said to him, "Thank you." The God lowered his eyes. "In the next reincarnation, you will get what you wish for." That was good. In the next reincarnation, someone would love me wholeheartedly. In the side story, White Birch, the supporting female character Aurora sometimes felt that she was picked up by her parents. She had asked this question before and was scolded by Mom. But if she wasn't picked up, she didn't understand why her parents always forgot about her. Whenever there was something going on with her sister, she would become completely invisible. It was a good example. She was standing a bit to the side of the school gate when she saw Dad take her sister's school bag and lead her sister home. It was her sister who looked back for her and said to Dad, "Dad, my sister isn't here." Dad searched around and found her, waved at her, and then joked, "Are you reluctant to leave the teacher? Why don't you come along?" Aurora slowly said, "Goodbye," to the teacher, thinking in her heart that it wasn't like that. She wanted to be led by Dad. She was walking on the other side of Dad, and the big hand was holding the school bag and couldn't hold hers. She thought to herself, was it because she didn't get the little red flower, so Dad didn't want to hold her? In order to make her parents like her, she tried hard to be a child who didn't cause them any worry, so that they could focus more on her sick sister. Then she might be praised with the words, "Aurora is so sensible. Mom will cook something delicious for you." She had been working hard for these compliments all along. She also studied hard, but she found that no matter how hard she studied, her mind just couldn't seem to catch on. Her elder sister was smart and dexterous, while she was rather clumsy. With such a comparison, it made her elder sister seem even more pitiable. She had overheard others' hushed conversations. They said, "Ivy is so smart, but her health is not good. Aurora is so dull. Poor Mr. and Mrs. Shin." She thought that perhaps someone was wishing that it was her who was sick instead of her elder sister. Sometimes Aurora thought the same way too. It wouldn't be bad if she were the one who got sick. Mom and Dad would surely take good care of her. But when she was sick, Mom did take good care of her indeed, but she would say, "Mom still wants you to help take care of your elder sister. Look at you." Aurora then felt very guilty. Mom was already so tired from taking care of her elder sister. If she had any more problems, it would make Mom even more tired. So she chose to be a not-so-smart but obedient kid, listening to her parents' words and staying by her elder sister's side all the time, becoming even more silent as the days passed by. Mom and Dad also mentioned her less to the outside world. Because there was nothing worth mentioning about her. She wasn't smart, was dull, and was just ordinary. She envied her elder sister and had secretly resented her too. But her elder sister was very nice to her, always thinking of her in whatever she did, which only made her feel even more guilty. Aurora felt as if she was in a stagnant space, and there was only her there. She stayed there, and no one could see her until a family moved in next door in junior high school. There was a big brother in that family. His father's surname was Smith, and his mother's surname was Johnson. His name was Matthew. Aurora thought that this big brother's parents must love him very much. Matthew was as smart as her elder sister. He would teach her how to do her homework and would also pat her on the head, saying gently to her, "Little kid, you don't have to be so sensible." Aurora didn't dare. She was afraid that if she wasn't sensible, her parents wouldn't like her anymore. But she liked Matthew's tolerance towards her. She liked staying by his side, like being next to a bonfire in winter. She could tell that Matthew liked her elder sister more. There was a look of heartache in his eyes when he looked at her elder sister, and his voice was even gentler when he talked to her elder sister. He had told her that he would study medicine and try to cure her elder sister. Even so, timid as she was, Aurora still confessed her feelings. She confessed on the day when Matthew received his admission notice. As expected, she was rejected. She then shrank back into her shell again, and this time she didn't want to come out anymore. Her elder sister and Mom went to another city to seek treatment. She and her dad stayed at home. They didn't meet often and didn't talk much either. Sometimes when she was alone in her room, she would feel very cold. The empty room was like a huge beast with its mouth wide open, swallowing her into the abyss. On her birthday, she was alone on the rooftop, looking at the moon all night. No one came to look for her. Only the wind knew of her existence. Aurora's memory was getting worse and worse. She maintained a normal appearance, but she couldn't fall asleep every night. Sometimes she wasn't even aware of her own existence, thinking that even if she disappeared, it wouldn't have any impact. Mom and Dad had her elder sister, and that was enough. She managed to get into college with great difficulty. She drifted among the crowd. She preferred to be alone even more and didn't want to talk to anyone. It wasn't until one day when her roommate discovered the wounds on her arm and took her to see a doctor that she realized that she had been ill for a long time. She stared blankly at the diagnosis report for a long time. Finally, she threw it into the trash can. She didn't tell anyone else because being sick was too troublesome and would cause a lot of trouble for her family. Her elder sister was admitted to the same university as Matthew. They were the golden couple on campus, with a great reputation, envied and blessed by countless people. Mom and Dad finally didn't have to be so tired anymore. Why should she go and shatter this beautiful scene? On the day she graduated, Mom, Dad, her elder sister, and Matthew all went to the station to pick her up. Mom and Dad carried her luggage for her. Matthew's car was parked on the other side of the road. Her elder sister pulled her across the road, looking as excited as a bird returning home. She thought that they still cared about her. Everyone was very happy, but only she was smiling on the outside while feeling extremely tired on the inside. Her body had become a heavy burden. She was supporting this body as if carrying a mountain on her back when she noticed the danger. Pushing her elder sister away was a subconscious decision. She had long engraved the idea of taking care of her elder sister in her bones and didn't regret it at all. The god told her that this was her mission as a supporting female character and that she had completed it very well. He could fulfill her wish. Aurora thought for a long time. Her mind was turning very slowly. She didn't even know what she wanted. She thought of her elder sister, of mom and dad, and there was a blocked feeling in her heart, but she didn't know why it was blocked there. After thinking it over and over again, she said, "If possible, please help me and let me know what it feels like to be loved wholeheartedly." She wanted such a person who would always care about her, send her flowers, and firmly choose her. If there was another reincarnation, she hoped that she would be the protagonist and be loved by others. The god said, "You will get what you wish for." Extra story. Ryan to AT first. Ryan felt that he was out of place in this world. There seemed to be one person missing in this world. He didn't know why. He just had this feeling. Until he moved and met a silent, reserved little girl with a low sense of presence. His heart immediately settled. At this moment, he felt that he had completely integrated into this world. Every time he got close to Aurora, his heart would beat very fast. He wanted to get close to Aurora, but Aurora always had her head down and didn't speak. When he rarely found that she was looking at him, he managed to hold back his excitement and speak. And every time he opened his mouth, he couldn't help but want to say more, but he was still in his voice-changing period, and his voice wasn't nice. When he saw Aurora smile after hearing his voice, he thought that she was laughing at how bad his voice sounded. He wasn't angry with her, though that he was just very embarrassed and annoyed at the damn voice-changing period. In order not to be disliked by Aurora, he tried his best to keep silent, quietly paying attention to her and helping her in silence. God knows how happy he was when Aurora wanted him to talk to her all the time. However, she was so easily frightened that she would wrap herself up at the slightest provocation, just like a snail retracting into its shell when in danger. He was aware of the situation in her family and knew about her difficulties, but he was just an outsider. All he could do was to be nicer to her, even nicer. He had always thought of himself as a cool guy since childhood, never expecting that he had the talent to be like an old mother hen. When he saw Aurora, he always thought of a lot of things and would tell her about them in bits and pieces. Fortunately, she didn't mind his being wordy. Sometimes, Ryan would feel so powerless because he could offer so little, and what Aurora really wanted was the love of her parents. He had no way to control others' love. All he could do was to do more himself. When Aurora shrank back, he would walk over and get closer to her. He was wholeheartedly trying to give her a helping hand. Teenagers can hardly understand complex emotions, but he knew that he had the most genuine partiality and heartache for Aurora. He felt sorry for her efforts. Aurora studied very hard, or rather, she worked hard silently at everything she did. But her eyes were getting dimmer day by day, yet she kept all her thoughts to herself and remained gentle on the outside. He hoped that Aurora could be happy. He sent Aurora flowers for the first time at the school's 18th birthday ceremony. That was when he was climbing the mountain and saw the sunflowers blooming in the flower field. He went to buy the flowers from the flower farmer and was overcharged. He thought it was worth it because he heard Aurora's response, just like when she made her first request to him, asking him softly again, "Ryan, will you always be by my side?" How could it not be good? He ordered a cake for Aurora, but there was a mistake in the cake shop. By the time he got the cake, it was already quite late. He ran back all the way protecting the cake and rang her doorbell in a hurry, because he knew that Aurora didn't like being alone. On her 18th birthday, if she was alone, she would surely be sad, but there was no one at her home. He called her and saw Aurora sitting on the rooftop. His heart was in his throat, his legs were weak, and he subconsciously opened his arms. This was their first hug, but this hug wasn't as comforting as Ryan had expected. He held her, and she was crying and shaking all over. She was finally willing to pour out all her grievances, but she also broke down. Ryan's heart felt as if it had been punched hard. How could he have only noticed now that Aurora was already this sad? His eyes were so sore that he almost cried too. He didn't know how to comfort Aurora. He felt that Aurora's inside was already empty, and the cold wind was still blowing in. All he could do was to hold her tighter. But he felt that he couldn't warm her up anymore. He could only helplessly say what he had always thought, "Aurora, I was born for you." He wanted to use this sentence to encourage her, but what she thought was whether it would be tiring for him to do things for her. How could it be tiring? He thought that making Aurora happy was the thing he was most proud of, but he was really panicked. After that night, Aurora seemed to be okay, again, but he always felt that he couldn't hold on to her anymore. Aurora seemed as if she would disappear at any time. He wanted to take her to see a psychologist, and she didn't resist. She seemed to be indifferent to everything, as if she had given up on everything. At this time, he regretted so much. When he heard Aurora asking him to give up on her, his regret reached its peak. Why had he been so restrained? He should have told her parents how outrageous their actions were when they ignored her time and time again. Now it seemed too late. Even if he went to find them again, he could see from Aurora's eyes that she no longer cared about her parents. Ryan was so afraid that something would happen to Aurora. He didn't want to leave Aurora at all. Aurora wouldn't make him tired because instead she had been comforting him all the time, but he himself felt more and more sorry for her, more and more heartbroken. After Ivy's last surgery, Aurora went to buy flowers. She was very calm when choosing the flowers. The soft light shone on her body, and it seemed that she would merge into the light in the next second. He saw the sunflowers again and gave them to her. She said thank you to him again, but in fact Ryan didn't want to hear her say thank you. He hoped that Aurora could have a little temper, asking him to buy her flowers, and after he bought them for her, she would hold the flowers in one hand and hold his hand with the other, skipping forward. He witnessed Aurora's parents' apology in person and also saw their regret and saw the collapse of the world after Aurora told them her true thoughts. He felt as if he was going to disappear too, but he had no regrets, because he saw Aurora standing there safely. The lilies had disappeared, but the sunflowers were still bright. He thought that Aurora could break away from this sad world, and he was sure that he would see her again. He had never told Aurora that the flower language of sunflowers is, "There is no one else in sight and all I see is you." He would only choose Aurora.